Hey guys, Ian here. Welcome back to ProduceFaster.com. This is our second video. We're sitting down doing a little bit of quick mixing today, and we're going to deal with EQ next. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, this is part two, so go back and watch the other videos. All right, let's dive back in.
All right, so in the last video, we just did a really quick level and pan, and the goal was just to get a groove that I like in this song. So let's go ahead and take my looping off, and let's listen to it real quick.
Snare sounds a little weak, but
yeah, it does sound a little weak.
that's what we're going to fix.
And as you can see, the snare sounds a little weak to us. We'll just bring this up and out a little bit. But basically, just to recap, is I decided, hey, I like the keys. I want that to be like my feature instrument. No song is complete without a good foundation, so that's your kick, snare, and your bass. Your drums are going to have a lot more elements, I'm sure of it, but we're just going with basic things here. So what I'm going to do is make sure everything has an EQ on it. In Logic, it's pretty easy. You just tap in here, and it adds an EQ. So I'm just going to go ahead and add an EQ to everything.
Yep.
And I'll do that. All right, so now that everything has an EQ, I'm going to do something called a complementary EQ on the kick and the bass. I love Logic because Logic allows me to bring up multiple EQ windows. Ableton's my preferred DAW to produce in, and it doesn't do this, so maybe it will someday. What we're going to do with our EQs, and part of the challenge of the 10-minute song and the quick mix is to use stock plugins and stock instruments that come with your DAW. We're in Logic, so we're just using their channel EQ here. And so as I play this, there's just a couple, there's just like one term to know. It's the fundamental frequency. The fundamental frequency is the highest, so it means an amplitude, and the lowest in frequency sort of line that you'll see here. There's a lot of technical ways to say this, but I'm just trying to keep it simple. Here we go. So what I'm seeing with the bass is the fundamental frequency is about right here. And so in order to mark that, I drag this over. It looks to me about 66 or 68 hertz.
Yeah.
And then with the bass, just going to guess maybe at about 100. Somebody, you might be watching this and see it somewhere else. Let's look at it again.
Yeah, that seems about right.
I mean, it does go
There's
back
some
here.
Sparkle towards the higher end, but
Yeah, it does go back here a little bit. So we could just say, all right, so the bass, low frequency, 96, and then the kick drum, 67. So what we want to do is we want to keep what we found to be the fundamental frequency of the kick and keep the fundamental frequency of the bass. Now, in order to do that, we're going to draw a subtractive complementary EQ in the opposite EQ plugin.
yeah. So basically, what happens is some of these instruments, like a bass and a kick drum, are both bass instruments, and so they are kind of overlapping and stomping on each other's sound. So what we want to do is the fundamental frequency is where these instruments sound the best. So we're going to identify where they sound the best and make room for each other in those places without them stomping on each other.
That's exactly right. And we're going to do it in about 3 dB increments.
Yes, less is more. It's a mistake I made. I didn't believe Graham Cochran from the Recording Revolution. He said, nope, don't just 3 decibels, maybe 6. And especially in Logic, it deceives you. It doesn't look like you've done much. And so I'm dragging that thing down, messed up a lot of mixes. Just do 3 or 6.
That's right.
It's a really great way to go.
So here I have my subtractive EQ at about 67, about 3 dB. I tighten up the Q. And then so over here, I still have it preserved. I want to keep 96, so I'm going to go right over here to 96 and start to carve out ish. It doesn't have to be super exact all the time.
If you don't know what a Q is, it just means the width of the point.
Right. Yeah, it stands for quality, but it doesn't really seem like it adds much quality.
I don't know whose idea that was.
The next thing I want to do is add these high pass filters. And so my personal preference is I like to keep more of the bottom end of the kick. So I might just take this,
Gives it volume, gives it kind of a fatness.
yeah, and then just scoot the bass out of it a little bit. So let's listen to how that sounds. Okay, let's listen to it off. There should be a little separation there and some of the mud cleared up.
Yeah.
See, you lose some of the distinctness in the bass guitar. Now it's back. That's a simple little fix. So let's move right on. The next place I want to go is to the snare drum. And I want the snare drum to work with the keys as a preference that I have, because I like the keys to be what I've said is our feature instrument. I'm going to go ahead and bring this EQ up, and then the snare, and what you'll notice already is these keys have Logic's place where it said, hey, you should EQ here.
Yeah.
You can do that, and it also turned our analyzer off.
Thanks, Logic.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and listen to it and see what's happening. So basically, if you're looking at this line, it's just kind of use this to creatively reduce the volume of everything. That's fine. I'm going to go to user default and do this. And so a few things that I want to do is just clear up the mud, if there is any, on the snare and on the keys. So I'm just going to drag this high pass filter on both of these to a place that I'm comfortable with. Seems to be good to me.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing that I want to do is work on my snare. Snare is a really important part of the rhythm section. So that's your kick, snare, your bass, and maybe another instrument. But for us, it's kick, snare, and bass. And I want to discover the place in the snare that I like the most. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do in order to bring that out without adding an EQ boost. But I'm going to start by just dragging this up and sweeping and finding what I like about the snare. So I like this 2K.
Yep, right around there.
All right, so we have these little points here that we can use. Let's just add another point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag down around my 2K that I like. And then, so you can see what's happening. I'm taking this out by quite a bit. It's 9 dB, 9.5. I should probably go back up to 6 because it's a little too much.
Yep.
So I go to about 6. It's okay if it's a little off.
Yep. Good.
And I should be keeping this here. And so what has happened is, since I've taken this down by 6 dB, I've probably lost some of the energy in my snare, and I may need to raise the fader. So let's give it another listen.
Sure did. There it is.
We'll fix some of that with compression in a later video, but what I've done is I've just preserved this part of the snare that I like. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the keys. I'm going to put this on a loop so that I don't have to keep on stopping and starting over again. So again, what do I like about this? I kind of like this. what you see is I've kind of redrawn my my strange line. Logic's line was different than mine, but I'm kind of just reducing the frequencies I don't like and keeping the part that I do like. And the reason why I kind of had it worked out in my mind ahead of time, I know that snare and a part of the keys, because the keys cover every spectrum of sound potentially, I wanted to just kind of work these things together so I can hear them both distinctly. So let's see if I accomplish that.
It is always a better idea to be subtracting around rather than boosting all over the place. You're just going to make a big mess if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that I'm liking that, I'm just going to go and wrap it up with my electric guitar and my pad. And so this is the stage of the game where you want to keep in mind what you've already done, the EQ decisions you've already made. So I'll reference some of that. And again, what I'm going to do is just filter out some of the lows, because I only want my kick, bass, and any other instrument I might decide on to take up that space. And then once again, I'm going to remember, well, what am I preserving on my keys? Well, I'm preserving, this area here, about, from 1 to 2 that I like, and a little bit of keeping a little bit here at the 10 and keeping some in between the 100 and 200. So I'm going to keep that in mind while I'm working on my pads and my guitar. So you can hear when that pad swells what I've done, and you can see I've done it in both. Just taken out some of these frequencies where I know I've already wanted to preserve them, and the instruments that I want to stand out more. There's probably a lot of ways to approach this. It's just the way I do. Again, we're mixing according to our own flavor. There's a lot of rules, technical things you're going to pick up, but you can see, again, sort of complementary. I wanted to keep this in the keys, keep this in the snare, so I'm going to reduce it a little bit in the electric guitar and in the pad. Why didn't I do a lot of other subtractive EQ here? Well, if you remember when we were doing our gut mix, our level 1 panning, I kind of kept the pad and the electric guitar in the background to bring the keys up, so I didn't feel like it needed a lot.
They're not going to compete too much. It's going to be all right. All right, next thing we're going to get into is compression. So you have anything else on the EQ spectrum?
Other than don't overthink it. Don't overthink EQ. Just make these simple decisions, and if you're fighting with 2 instruments and you can't get the EQ right, well, maybe you're in the wrong register, so consider that.
Cool. All right, guys, we will see you in the next video.